can't sleep. I can't sleep. I can't sleep. I can't sleep until the morning rise. Baby, I can't sleep. Babe, I'm laying off the coffee.
I'm just gonna rock here for a second.
Babe, I'm going for a walk. Baby, feeling warm and fuzzy.
Good tune.
Want you making me a log? It makes me weak. And baby, I can't sleep.
I can't sleep. I wish I could. Lately, it's been really tricky. How you guys doing today? I haven't come live in a while and talked about video editing. We've been talking a lot about what happens to the videos when we put them onto YouTube and some growth strategies on what best practices are and how to actually get the content to connect with your audience and how to do things like titling your videos. And I wanted to get back to some basics, which is some of the questions people ask me every day about just some real rock bottom YouTube video editing techniques that sometimes it's like, I have problems when I try this. I have problems when I try that. That's a hurdle for me. And this channel started off using some pretty basic video editing software and trying to make sure you guys could make videos effectively. So I never want to get too far away from that. That is part of the process. Let me look at some of the comments we have going on in here. What's this one? What's Maddie and Kiki saying? This might be too much information, but it's 100% true. I had a dream about Daniel last night. Well, really? And he really helped my sis and I through our thumbnails. Daniel, you're so good. You even helped the battalion in Dreamland. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Thanks, Maddie and Kiki. Yeah, we talk a lot about these kind of strategies in my in the battalion members only group, which is just a great place to get your strategy on and really figure out ways to grow your channel more rapidly. So I'm glad that that stuff sticks in your head, but don't let it interrupt your sleep. Let's get right into some questions here. From the Occult Priestess, she asked, if I render the same video several times through the editing process, does the video lose quality? Videotapes lose quality after each copy made. Right, so like it's the Xerox effect. That's what we used to call it. Like, I don't know if they still have that company anymore, but when you would make a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, they would slowly degrade. It doesn't so much degrade as it adds compression. And what it does is it's similar to that. It's compressing it down so the raw video files are being compressed down into the codec that they're using. You lose most of that in the first, and you're saying render, but I think you mean export. It's like I'm used to using Filmora, which has a render feature for speeding up how it works while you're in production. But you mean like export. So yeah, every time the first export is the one that's going to take the big hit, which is why whenever I bounce, let me do this. Let me add some stuff to screen here. A lot of times when I'll have something that I'm exporting from my projects, what I'll do is, let me see. Let me just get some sample media and a piece of video here from whatever they have. So if I have like this thing in here that let me get this down to size. I've got all kinds of stuff going on in my track here. If I'm going back here and I go to export this thing, what I'll do is, I'll do this a lot. I'll bounce where I'll have a lot of things going on, and there's so much going on in my project that I'll go, wow, every time the software is running, it's trying to do all these things I have in my timeline, but all those things are done. Like I'm done with where the basic cuts are. I'm done with the color correction. I'm done with all the basic stuff. Why don't I combine this all together into a single video file and bring it back to my video editing software, so my software isn't working so hard and my computer's not working so hard trying to do everything that I've told it to do in the moment instead of just exporting it and bouncing it. So what a lot of times I'll do is I'll export, and when I do export, I'll make sure that the settings I use are going to be very high. Even if the thing is at 1080p, I'll export up at UHD because it doesn't add any crop to it. And then I'll bring the bit rate way up. I'll bring it up 100,000 plus, even though the stuff I film is only at maybe 50,000, 60,000 kbps bit rate. And then I'll make sure that the audio is at as high as Filmora will allow. If I'm going to bounce the audio, a lot of times I'll leave the audio track in place, bounce the video portion, bring it back in, and then still have the original audio track in the project that I'm leaving there and just sync it back up. So think of it in terms of the very first one is the very first time you export it is where it's going to take the biggest hit. And then after that, it's far less because it's sort of already compressed into that codec, but it can add a little. So I always say step it up. It's not that it improves the quality if you export at a higher bit rate or a higher resolution, but what it does is it helps offset some of that degradation. And one of the things you want to think about on YouTube too is, like, if you ever notice when I put videos on YouTube, they all say that they're in 4K, and you can click on 4K and it'll show it at, UHD, the not full 4K, but UHD. I just export my content that I film at 1080, and I'll export it at 4K just because I want that extra. It's a different codec that they use on YouTube, and it allows a little more bandwidth, so that my 1080 stuff looks better because they've opened up some bandwidth because they think it's 4K. So that's a little trick you can do along the way. Let me run through some of these. Pumping you to my live audience right now. Hey, thanks, Gunmuse. I appreciate that. How can I do infinite zoom and morph in one image using Filmora? Very specific question. Infinite zoom and morph in one image. And I've got videos on how to create an infinite zoom technique. It's a long technique. It involves so that's to try to teach you how to do it would be I could take the entire live stream. Really looking for specific questions on problems that are hurdles. But if you look on my channel, you'll see that I do an infinite zoom technique that I've taught. The video's titled Infinite Zoom. I would learn that first. And the morph techniques, you can apply afterwards. So I'd probably do the one first and then apply the other second would be the way I'd approach it. Hi, Daniel. How do I create, or where can I get good sound effects from around the home, like lids being placed on pots and pans and socket switches being turned off? Boy, let me tell you something right off the bat here. That's from Homekeeping Channel. I did an entire video where it was all about what I called Foley. Let me see if I can at least find it for you so you know what I'm talking about while I'm speaking. And I think the best place to find those things is to make them yourselves, especially if you've got a homekeeping channel where you're using this stuff every day. I would sit and I would do Foley effects so that you actually recorded all your own sound effects ahead of time, and you can do them yourself instead of trying to find it like, well, that doesn't sound like a lid, and that doesn't sound like a lid. Well, that sounds more like the lid. I'll give you some examples of where you can find it, but this is the video I did. Let me see if I can share the screen here. It's this one right here. Make sound effects for your videos, called Foley. I did it 2 years ago. So look up that Make Sound Effects for Your Video on my channel, and that'll show you exactly how to do that. Where I did all this stuff, I was like making my own sound effects because sometimes they just don't have the right one. I really wish I had a perfect heartbeat sound effect and it didn't quite sound right. I'd make them myself, or different things, especially with lids coming off and stuff. I'd be sitting in front of my microphone with all the pots and pans and lids, and I'd be recording. I'd go into I'd make sure it was a quiet time of day with a good microphone, and I'd sit there and I'd record them. And I would have my own stockpile of sound effects, especially if it was stuff I was coming back to over and over again, where I got a whole file that's got 20 different lids popping off, like a Tupperware lid, a metal pot lid, whatever other lids there might be. Clearly I'm not a lid connoisseur, but those kind of things, if you do them yourselves, I showed exactly how to do that kind of stuff, make your own sound effects, and then make them sound good too. But if that doesn't work for you, the two that let me see, where do I go for mostly sound effects? Let me pull up, I tend to go to, for paid, I use storyblocks.com. Storyblocks has an audio section. I don't know if you can see it in the upper drop down here. It starts with video, but it does all audio, music, and sound effects. So you can go into sound effects and you can find, say there's a lid on a pot kind of thing. We'll see if they have anything like that. So here's see lid on the pot lid, lid closed down. So there's all these. I don't know if you can hear these. Can you hear that? Okay, here's another pot lid. There's a lid coming off. Here's another lid. There's another lid dropping. Coffee pot lid. So there's all these different sound effects that you can use. That's why I usually have a few subscriptions to a few places that I think I think Storyblocks is worth it because it's got great video B-roll. It's got some good music. The song I played at the beginning no, I think the one I played at the beginning was from Epidemic, but there's a lot of the songs that I use on my channel are from Storyblocks. It's pretty good. Another place is right inside of YouTube. Hold on one second. Let me find you this. I'll pull it up real quick and I'll show you for anyone who doesn't know where it is. Okay, hold on. Oh, my music is a little different. I don't know if I can show you this. I'm in a beta plan, but well, whatever. Let them yell at me. It's not the first time I've gotten in trouble. Inside of your YouTube studio on the left, if you go down to the bottom, there's a music section. I'm in the creator program that they're starting to do this where it's going to be more paid and stuff, if it'll load. But they have sound effects in here that you can browse along. It's right down here on the sidebar. You'll see the YouTube audio library. It'll probably say YouTube audio library for you. They're switching it over to creator music now, where they're actually going to have more tracks that you can use. I think a lot of you guys know that they're trying to integrate more popular music and things. So there's going to be stuff that you can get your hands on coming up. But in the interim, that's a good place. Those are free assets. The only thing about the stuff you get from the YouTube audio library is technically you've got the permission to use that stuff on YouTube. So you can put it in your YouTube videos, and you could post your videos somewhere else. You could say, here's a link to my YouTube video on Facebook. What you can't do is upload your videos to Facebook using any of the music or sound effects from the YouTube audio library. It's only free and royalty free if you upload it and host it on YouTube. You can share it anywhere, but it has to be uploaded and hosted on YouTube. Good question, though. Let me see where I'm going. Do you have any good tips for storage management for editing? Sammy, that's a great question. Thank you for the super chat, Sammy. Been a while since I've talked to you, pal. Hope you're doing good. Yeah, this is what I do. Hold on one second. Give me 1 second. I have to wander over here. There's what I like is these. There's a million ways to do it. Some people like using their own server that I won't get into that because it's a little advanced for most people. But these are the Samsung T series SSDs. So they're solid state drives. They're tiny. They're like the size of like a little thick, like a couple of credit cards stacked together. And you can get these. I think this one's 2 terabytes. They're high speed, so when you plug them into your computer, they're great for storage because they're nice and easy. And I use about 2 of these a year in terms of, because I save everything. So these little Samsungs are really great. And what I do is I'll just plug them in. Everything I work on, this is one thing as I want to talk to you guys about. External storage can be tricky. If you've been trying to use your video editing software and you find that it lags a lot, and one of the things that if you're doing is if your video files and stuff are on an external drive, that means your computer's trying to go through the USB connection to the external drive, grab that video file, bring it back over and work on it. So it's like a long highway that's trying to truck that information back and forth, and it can be problematic. So what I do is whenever I'm working on a project, it's right on my desktop. I put it on my desktop. I create a file system. Let me see if I can even show you something that I do. Give me a second. I'll show you like a typical file system for me. So a file system, let me pull this over so you can see it. It's on the wrong. This is what happens when you have too many screens, Sammy. Let me share this screen over here. So what'll happen is I'll have just a file folder like this, right? So there's a file folder there. When I open it up, let me get it to the right side. This has basically all of my my stuff in it. So I'll create separate files in here, one for audio, one for specific data, images, my mixes and video. Those basically the 4 ones are audio, images, video, and mixes, right? So any video stuff I'm putting in a project, I'll put it in the video file. So I create a substructure. So first folder I make is the name of my project. Say I'm making a video on how to do whatever, how to edit better videos. I'll call that folder how to edit better videos. Then I'll make a substructure, an audio file, video file, images file, and a mixes file. And then from there, what I'll do is I'll start putting things. Any of my audio tracks that I have in here could be music. I try to separate the music stuff and the sound effects. If you see here, I even have a sound effects file, sound effects that I've used in that project. Then I have an images file that has any images that I've used in that particular project. So all those images are right there and they're separate. I do the same with the video. All my videos are right here. All the video, this is all the raw video that I used. Here's any of the VFX videos that I used. As soon as it loads them up right in here. And then this other one is B-roll. So if there's any B-roll stuff that I'm using that's not the main footage. My computer's moving slow today. It's like, I don't want to open this up. And these are all B-roll video things that I'm using throughout that project. You can see how many pieces I put in my videos. There's a lot. And then I have the final mixes. So when I mix, I have all, you can see if you ask like, why do you have so many different mixes of this project? A lot of times I'll do that bounce, right? Like let's say I do a bounce, I'll bounce something out. I'll sit, and when I bring it back in, I'll start a new project under the same name. So it'll be project number 2, same title name, and then I'll put a 2 on it and I'll keep working. So that if I ever make a mistake along the way, I've got all the steps as I save the project through. If I go, oh man, I screwed something up on that bounce. I didn't overwrite my original project. I send it out, bring it back in. I save the project under a new title name, same title name, but number 2, number 3, and work down that way. And then once I'm all done with this file, Sammy, once everything's all done here and I've got it on my desktop, then I'll just send that out externally. I'll just save the whole thing over to my external drive. Or the other thing that you can do, which sometimes make it, if you're a Filmora user, what you can do is on when you save something, let me see, like this project here, a lot of people just go save project or save project as. This other option here, if you're using, some softwares do this and some don't, but most of the better ones do. They call it in Filmora, they call it archive project, which is like saving, but it not only saves the project, but all the assets you used in the project, all the video files, the audio files, or the images, so that if you send it to another location, then YouTube knows it's there, right? YouTube. Then Filmora knows it's there. The video editing software goes, oh, okay, you located everything all together and you saved it externally. So when you open it up, it kind of tells it, we know it's there, as opposed to moving it from your desktop to an external drive. And then when you open up in the external drive, the mix still thinks everything's on your desktop and you have to like click all the things and say, oh no, those files are here now. So that's what I basically do. I work on everything on my desktop until it's complete. And then when that thing is complete, I move that project over to an external drive, an SSD. And then at the end of the year, if I'm done with this, if I have, how many of the things I've worked on, once it starts getting filled up, I just put the date. When I start them, like this is a new one, but I'll put a date range on it. I'll just put a sticker on it that says like, oh, this is from, January of 2022 to, July of 2022. So anything I worked on during those dates, and I just library them. I could have years of that stuff and it probably wouldn't even take up a shoebox. So that's how I tend to do that. Quick questions here. Does the green label mean you're a member now? Yes, it does. The green label means you're a Italian member, which we love the group. To be honest, though, you never followed. I never did the follow through to Facebook where I was a member, so I let it lapse when the change. Yeah, credit card change. You should come back in. It's a great group. The best part of our group is not only the members only stuff and the members only live streams we do, which are more infrequent, maybe once a month or so. But we have the group that we're in there every day, hashing out strategy. Great place to be. Kind of just scrolling down through here. Reading. I've been editing my own YouTube videos for 13 years and there's still stuff I don't know. You and me both. Occult Priestess. You and me both. There's a lot of things I always wrestle with, because the software's changed. There's always sort of new updates and things. I'm going to say this, though. When it comes to editing, I'm a huge fan of being really good at the basics. Instead of trying to learn really fancy editing techniques and like, how do I do this crazy technique, which is fun. I think those are fun for practicing and sort of learning things. In general, when it comes to YouTube videos, what you should be really getting good at is pacing, structure, learning how to capture your video really well, learning how to color grade it or color correct it, learning how to use music effectively in your videos, learning how to mix the music, learning how to get your audio to sound better. Because at the end of the day, I don't use a lot of like crazy effects. I use like transitions. I use like dissolve and like a box turn and stuff. Real simple like slides and most of the time it's straight cuts. So the real trick is learning to be not leaning on a lot of fancy transitions and stuff, thinking that's going to make your edit look better. What makes your edit look better is better quality ingredients, better video and audio, and then learning to make them look and sound really smooth all the way through. That's the real trick. Let me see. I'm scrolling. I am scrolling. How are you? Pretty good, Rick. How you doing? Here I go. Let me see. Let me see what this question is. L. DePat says, can you do editing in Filmora like one in TikTok? It's zooming in on one subject, then zooming out the background. Zooming in on the subject and zooming out the background. That's basically what they call a dolly zoom. It's a reverse dolly zoom is what you're talking about. But that's actually, yeah, I've got a video on that. If you look up, Give me 1 second and I'll find it. That's because it's a technique you can. And TikTok, the trick to make sure when you're making a TikTok video if you're using Filmora, that's what you're asking, right? Yeah, Filmora. If you're using Filmora, make sure in the upper left here when you do your project settings, set your project setting to, it'll default to usually 1920 by 1080. You want to make sure you change your project to a 9 by 16 for TikTok. So right here, 9 by 16 portrait mode. That'll swap it that way. And then make sure when you export, you do the same thing. When you go export, make sure that it's also the settings that it's set for the reversed. Right here, it's 1080 1920. So that's right, 1080 1920. So just make sure. Sometimes I see people make that mistake where they're like, oh, I opened up Filmora and I went to export and I thought I exported it as a short, but it still didn't play as a short, or YouTube didn't recognize it as a short. And it's because they didn't have their export and their project settings all set to 9 by 16. But what was the one I was trying to find for you really quick? You were asking about the parallax effect is what you're actually asking. Let me see if I can find the parallax effect. I can find that for you quickly. Let me see if you can see it. Parallax effect. It's the idea. It's actually a simple technique in filming that you do it's also called a dolly zoom, that makes it look like the foreground is moving in one direction, the background's moving in another. And it's the ability to film in one direction and zoom the opposite in your video editing software. Hold on, let me just do this and you'll be able to see what I mean. This was a parallax effect video that I did. It'll kind of explain, this is a parallax where it looks like the mountains are doing one thing and the background's doing another.
The parallax effect is a mind-bending technique that makes it seem like the motion of the foreground and the background are doing the impossible.
Right, so that's all that is a parallax effect. It was actually just what it is like if a camera's zooming in, right? It's zooming in on the mountain. What you do is you start in on the mountain in the edit and you do the opposite. You stay focused on the mountain and you pull back out. So it holds the foreground in place and it looks like the background's moving. It's a dolly zoom. There's a couple different ways to do it, but watch that video and that'll definitely walk you through exactly how to do it so that I don't have to sit here and explain it for too long for you. Then I get the same one. Yep, there's a TikTok one. That's the same question. How many times are you going to ask it? Ask it once. Come on, I answered you. You're killing me. You guys are killing me. Using Filmora with multiple audio tracks, I sometimes lose the sound on one track on playback. It's as if one audio layer is riding or blocking over the other layer. Not sure what I'm doing wrong. Make sure this is one of the big things I tell you, Hopius Maximus. Make sure, one, that you're running a strong computer. That in that computer that you have all of the most recent Windows updates, so that all of that Windows is up to date. Because what happens is Filmora will have an update that relies on a component of Windows to do what it needs to do. And if you haven't updated all of your whatever Windows, you should be on Windows 11 at this point, then it's going to fight. It's missing the components to make the software work properly, because the software is relying on those components, so it's compliant with the Windows version you have. The other thing is make sure that your graphics driver and then your processor drivers are up to date with the latest. I usually go with the game ready drivers. Go right to the manufacturer. If you're using like Intel or using AMD, make sure you go right to them and make sure you're always updating the drivers, because that's where sometimes you'll hear issues is your drivers are out of date. You don't even realize it. People run their computers and, like every month I'm back in there making sure all my drivers are up to date and everything's working the way it should. And then make sure you're running the latest version of Filmora, because Filmora has had glitches where one particular version has some issues, and they go and they fix it. That's why you'll see like Filmora 11. We're on the 30th version of Filmora 11 so far, because they keep updating it as they figure out, there's a glitch. We added a new feature, and then what happened is it caused another glitch, and they had to fix the glitch, so they'll run an update once they realize there was a glitch they missed. So make sure you're running all those things. Updated Windows, updated drivers for your graphics card and for your processor, and make sure that Filmora's latest version and Windows is updated. Working my way through. Hey, Daniel, what's the best software, a way to get nice captions with different colors? I see people doing on TikTok and IG. The best software, the best way to get nice captions. Like text over, Annette? I use Filmora. I think Filmora works well. I think there's some tricks in there that you guys can use. Let me show you something. I think sometimes everyone just uses the standard text and goes, oh, that's how I use text, right? One of the things, let me start from scratch here. New project. I'm going to start. Don't save this, please. Let me just grab a piece of whatever media here. It doesn't matter what it is. Sample media, video. If there's something happening, you got a piece of video here. If you want to put text over it, a lot of times what people will do is they'll go, okay, here's my title. I'm going to add a title track. I like default. I use that default all the time. Nothing added to it at all. And there's your text. One of the things you got to remember is that whatever your font is, Filmora uses the fonts that are in your computer. So if I clicked on the title track and this list of fonts here, this is all whatever's installed on my computer, not what's installed on Filmora. So if you're on Windows, you can very easily add fonts by just installing them in the computer, restarting Filmora, and then those fonts show up. There's some that you will see more often than others. Like a lot of times, everyone's been using the, what's Mr. Beast? The Comica, is that it? Comica Axis? That's the Mr. Beast font that everyone sees. So here's that Mr. Beast font that everyone's been kind of used to. But here's a cool trick you can do too. If you want more control, you know, for this, one thing people do is you can write them out. So here's your title. That's a great one. One of the things you can do to make it really pop if you're doing something is take it to the next level. Click on your default title, and go into the advanced options, and that's where you can do things like, oh, I know, I want to outline it. No, I don't want to outline it in purple. I think that looks terrible. Maybe black. I'll put a little black around it. That'll help make it pop. Another thing you can do is you can add like a drop shadow to it. So if you add a drop shadow, Filmora's drop shadow by default is horrible. I'll set the direction. This shows you which way the shadow is going to go. I want it to go maybe down to the left. Let's turn the blur down. Let's turn the distance so you can see it. Can you see that shadow showing up? That's just the distance away from it. Maybe keep it about that far away. Let's turn the opacity down. We don't want it super black. We just kind of want it like a shadow. And then maybe add a little blur, maybe 1 or 2 pixels worth of blur, just so it blurs a little bit. Kind of good right there. So it just helps make it pop. See how that pops a little bit? Then you just hit OK. Well, one of the things you should think about too, if you're actually putting captions, if you want to make them pop, there's a couple of cool, in Filmora especially, you can do things with the animation. Up in this animation, I like the typewriter one. So if you hit typewriter and then you hit play, it'll actually type out the words. See, like that. So when you want that to actually, as you're saying it, that's just a cool little trick to get it to like, oh, I'm saying your title here. And you kind of have it typing as you're saying it, your title here. And it kind of looks like it's being typed along as you speak it. And then these 2 in and out points, that controls how quickly the type is, I'll have the speed of that type, and then how quickly it goes out. A lot of times I'll turn the out completely off. And this is a slower type. And the more you push it towards the beginning, then it's the faster type, like that. So nice and simple. That's a cool, easy way to do things like that. So there's that. See, it pops a little bit more than it did before I did that. Little simple tricks like that make it easier to have things type out and do those kind of things. Remember, the other thing I would tell you too is the longer you stretch, this is something that I don't think most people talk about. Just look at this. See how fast the type motion is right now for this title. Can everybody see this? Pretty quick, right? I mean, I started it and it was like, man, that typed pretty quickly because I had it set to type pretty quickly. But if I stretch this out to here, now watch the speed of the typing. Okay, the reason it does that is if you open up that advanced tab, what I told it was I just stretched the entire length out. So when I made the amount of time the text was going to be on screen longer, Filmora doesn't proportionately change this. It leaves it as like if you said, okay, 10% of your video should be us showing the type happening and then it's all in. If you make the clip longer, then 10% of a longer clip is going to be slower. So things like that, you want to make sure you go back and speed up that typing if you want it faster. If you make your text track longer, make sure you go back in and just speed up it so that happens more quickly. It's one of those things that you have to pay attention to. I run into that a lot, and people ask me that question, like, my text is too slow. Like, well, just change the speed of it. Another thing you guys can do that I don't think a lot of people know you can do is, let me do this. If you shut off, here's a cool trick too. If you want to do your own technique with your text, See how this is all on screen right now? Let me shut off everything but the text track. Now, believe it or not, even though you can't see, you see this like shadow and there's an outline and everything I have on this. If you shut off the main track, shut off everything else so that you're just looking at this, take a snapshot of it. See this camera icon that's underneath the preview window? Take a snapshot. Now what that will do is it puts a snapshot right here up in your projects, into your media files. Now instead of a text track, you actually have an image track, and you can, whoop, let me try that again. I apologize. Let me put that on top. And what you can do, it looks just like any image. You can stretch it out, and you now have that exact same text, but it's a PNG image track. See, looks the same. It doesn't have that motion in it now because it's just a snapshot. But there's cool stuff you can do here. Now, if you do this, you can make your own kind of animation. Like you can now, because it's an image, you can treat it like any image file. And you can go, okay, let me lock the main track and let me go, I would like this title to be right here at that point. Maybe I even want it a little lower. I can click up in the preview window and go, let me put it there. That's where I want it at that point. Let me go to the animation tab, customize, and add a keyframe. So at this point, it's saying, hey, right in the middle, that's where that needs to be. But maybe I wanted it to kind of appear. I can go back to the beginning. I can click on this track. And then I can do stuff like, I could bring it up from the bottom. I could squash this down like that. And what it'll do is it'll make that pop up like that. Or if I wanted it to come in from the side, I could either take the whole thing and slide it off, right? I could push the whole thing off and then it would kind of slide in as it came in. Boom, there's my title. Or I could have it do all kinds of stuff. I could have it even like squash in on itself. I could go, I know, I'll take the left side and go in towards the middle. And I'll take the right side and I'll go in towards the middle. And now what it'll do is it'll look like it expands. Zoom, like that, right? So there's a lot of different tricks that you can do using, turning your title tracks into an image track and create your own animations. I do that all the time because some of the animations on Filmora they're okay. But sometimes they're so overused. Sometimes I just want to dissolve something and have it fly in and then fly out in the way that I want. And Filmora doesn't quite have the motion I want, so I'll just turn it into an image track and make the motion myself. Let me see. Let's see. I had an issue with exporting where it cuts out portions of the video, but it is there in the editor. Yeah, where like there's like a black spots in there. That was a previous version of Filmora had that issue. So my guess is you are not running the latest version of Filmora. That's typically what there was. It was I can't remember which version of that was. It was quite a few back though. So what you want to do is make sure. I don't even know if I have the current version. I haven't checked. The way you check is you go up to your help tab. And you can, where is it? Check for updates right here. And it'll tell you if there's a newer version out. And it says it's up to date. But I don't always even trust that. If you want to know if you have the latest version, just go right to filmora.com and re-download the software. And it'll always give you the latest version for your region. So filmora.wondershare.com, just download it again and it'll always have the latest version for you, even if it's telling you you're up to date. Because sometimes I've seen they have a new version out that they haven't formally released. So the software is saying, nope, you've got the latest version, when in fact there's a newer version that they're put out that just hasn't been, they're still kind of making sure that it's working right. So you can get a newer version sometimes by doing that. Let me see. Is there a good free way to transform one's PNG shapes into another PNGs, one image into another? I'm talking like an anamorph effect. Yeah, kind of. That's a tricky thing. Like Filmora has a morph. Like if they have a morph feature that, is it great? No, it sort of melds them together. It's not like that really great true morph where like the shapes absolutely swap into each other, but like it kind of works. I don't know if I would go, how much I believe it really works. And you're talking about a PNG shape, like a circle into a square kind of thing. It's a good question. Let me see if I can, I don't know. I've never really tried it on Filmora with like a shape like that. Let me see what happens. Let me see if I can do it. The only way you learn is to try it, right? Let me get my face out of this thing. So you're saying like if you had see if I can remember how to do these again. So we would let's do a sample color. Let's start with we want to do the same colors. Why not, right? Let me get rid of all this stuff. if I can unlock this and delete all of this. Let's start with you said you started with like a square. Okay, let's do that. Let's do a square. Let's try a square. Put it in the center. And then you want it to morph like into a circle. Okay, so let's go halfway through this and let's split it. And let's try to turn that into a circle, which would mean I'd need to put a mask on it. Not transitions, I want effects. So I need an image mask or a layer mask, whichever they call it. Is it shape mask? I think you can do masks up in the left now, right? Image? Yeah, you can do a mask. Let me do a circle mask on this. And let's go a little bigger. This is pretty cool. Anybody notice this? These new masks that they have up here. They also have another, this toggle that we're always used to up here that kind of like lets you rotate it. They now have this other one down the bottom, and it creates like a feather effect. See that? It feathers the outside of the mask. That's kind of cool. I noticed that the other day. I was like, oh, I don't. And then below it, you can set the blur strength of the feather. But that's kind of cool. Something we haven't had before. Let me get this a little smaller so it looks like a circle. Okay. So there's a circle, and there's a square. Now, I've got a mask on this, so can I morph in between the two without it looking like just a dissolve? Good question. I don't know. Let me try. Morph. They do have some morph. There's a morph transition. Let me see if it'll do it. Let me see what that applies to the morph of the two shapes. Yeah, not great. For me, to try to get the morph to physically morph, that's a pretty heavy technique. It's one of those things like you really want to learn. You really want to learn an advanced advanced video editing software. Something like something that you can actually keyframe those shape motions, and it's going to it's basically a mask change. And you can't keyframe mask changes in Filmora. So like a lot of times people go, I just want to push a button and have it do it. There's probably something out there if you look hard enough, but I always try to say, like, learn how to find the right video editing software for what you're going to do. If you're in a position where you're making videos and you go, yeah, like almost every other video, I have to do these shape changes, then I would probably say get something that allows you to do that and learn how to do it in that software, because that's the right one for you because you do it a lot. For me, otherwise, I'd be like, oh, I'd probably just be, transitioning between them, and I'd probably do it as a dissolve or something. I'd probably just do a dissolve between the two and say, well, that's how I'll do it. I'll just have it dissolve from one and then have it dissolve into the other like that if I was doing a shape change. But that's me. I like very simple transitions. I don't tend to do like heavy morph stuff like that. I think me personally, for the kind of content that I do on YouTube, I find it distracting. So, but find the thing that works for you for whatever you happen to be doing, because I don't know exactly what you're making. There he is. How you doing, pal? Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Last time I think I saw you, we were all healthy. Then you were sick. Maybe next time we see each other, we won't be sick. How's that? Jackie Dan says, "Hey, is it good?" That's the same one. I'm sorry, Jackie. Hope I answered that question. I think we found. You already did this one. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get through some of these. I got Sammy's. I'm catching up. Did you forget Nick's live yesterday? Yes, you did. I was there. It was excellent, as always. Don't hesitate to manipulate sound effects. Absolutely. Great piece of advice, Jerry. One of the things is manipulate when I do most of my sound stuff. I've done some really deep dives on using a digital audio workstation called Reaper. Anyone who's been around my channel for more than a minute knows I've done a couple of live streams on it. I really believe in having a great digital audio workstation, because even some of the advanced video editing softwares just don't have great audio workstations in them. They're okay. I mean, like Adobe Premieres is pretty good. DaVinci Resolve is okay, but in terms of like really learning to manipulate audio, get a good digital audio workstation. Reaper, REAPER.FM, which is a weird dot to be at, but .fm. You can download that today for free and start using it unlimited, and then you can buy a license at a later time. They have like an unlimited free trial. That's my favorite one, and I manipulate stuff all the time. And I've got a lot of videos on my channel that show how to make things sound cinematic by manipulating the sounds, changing the pitch structure of them, stretching them out, changing the timbre, trying to change things like the, adding some reverse effects, reverb, slicing them, cutting them. Can really take that, a lot of times people think that's the effect, and I'll chop things left, right, and center to get the sound I want. I did some, like on the Foley video I did, make your own sound effects. I was doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I was doing spooky sounds by hitting weird strings on my guitar, but it worked perfectly. And it was just a matter of sort of playing around and taking things out of context. Sometimes you can get these huge sounds by doing dumb things like tapping on a Tupperware lid, and you can get like these massive sonic booms if you know how to play around with the audio a bit. Hi, Daniel. Do you have any tips for making shadows? For making shadows to sell a shot, and currently making a video of a baby Yoda versus Neo in some baby shots, and Yoda looks like he's floating in the air. Well, yeah, you can. A simple one. I don't know what software you're using, so that's something that you know. It depends on the software you're using, but almost every software has some sort of a drop shadow. So let's use your example. Let's go really quickly here. Let me delete some of this stuff out of here. What did you say you were using? Baby Yoda? Let me see if I can find a Baby Yoda. Let me see if I don't got a Baby Yoda image here. Let me go to, let me see if maybe Storyblocks has a Baby Yoda image. I'll see if I can find it. Baby Yoda. We shall see. Now, because it's unlicensed. Well, don't do this, folks. I'm going to pull one from the internet, but I always say don't do this because you get in trouble. Let me do a .png. Make sure you're only using images you have the license to. I would never put this out on my channel because I'd get myself in trouble. Is that a PNG? Yeah, it's a PNG. Open image in new tab. So let's take let's save that image in downloads, I guess, and then let's bring him into our photo editing. I mean, our video editing software. We'll start with how about a background of whatever, something white maybe. We'll just do a sample color for now. I'll do moon blue. That sounds about right, doesn't it? Moon blue for Baby Yoda. He would be on a moon. Let me come over here. Let me get my face out of here so I'm not blocking the timeline. Then I will import Baby Yoda. So Baby Yoda on downloads is that Baby Yoda? Yeah, okay, so here's Baby Yoda. Let's bring old Baby Yoda in. This is Grogu, not technically Baby Yoda. So what you could do is here, if I left click on this in my timeline in the upper left, drop shadow will allow me to create a drop shadow, create the direction. I'll say I want the shadow down and to the left or maybe down below him. Let me change the blur out a little bit. And it creates a shadow there, and you can control the distance of that shadow. You could throw the shadow off to the side. What I would probably think about doing, another way you could do this, but again, this is technical stuff, is see how the shadow isn't like on the ground shadow? See how it's like, that shadow looks like, well, I don't want the shadow behind his ears. I want the shadow to look like as if he were standing, and then I wanted him to be, whatever this thing is. I mean, I want to create a shadow effect. I've never done this before, but I would probably try something like not using that kind of shadow effect. I would turn that off. What I would probably do is I would turn off the background. This is kind of, I'm doing this because it's similar to what we just did a minute ago. Wait a minute, I need the background for this one shot. I'm going to duplicate this track. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to add another video track above this. And let me see if this works. And I'm going to add that exact same thing in up here. So I'm pasting. I'm just copy pasting. Of course I didn't do it right? Let me just bring another one down. Nice and easy. So basically, same track, right? You could have copied. You could have done a right-click copy and then pasted into another track too if you'd already done some work to it. Let's just start here. Oh, the reason I did that is I wanted it sized. Duh. Okay, so that one, copy. Track above, paste. There we go. Dan's brain is almost working today. What I would do is let me shut off the top one. I'm going to lock that so I don't screw it up, and I'm going to shut that off. Now I'm looking at the bottom one. Let me go up and take the color of this and the tone, and let me take all of the color and the brightness out of it. Can I turn it into a shadow? Like saturation? I bet you I can, or I don't know how far. Let me see how far it'll let me go with this. Let me adjust all the white balance down to like nothing. I'm take now it's only green. I don't know if it'll how far it'll let me go. I want to see how far I can destroy the color on this. That's pretty good. Let me take some of the reds out. All of these. I'm trying to get most of the color desaturated from the curves and make it look more like a shadow. Not bad. Let me take the light. Let me take all of the highlights out. All of the, I'm going to pump, no, we'll keep the shadows down. We'll keep most of the color out of it. So I'm going to keep as much as that down to a shadow. Now it looks like, well, Daniel, you made him disappear. True, but now look what he looks like. He looks like a shadow. So now let's try this. Now let's turn back on the original track. Okay. Now here's where we can have fun. Background track locked. Upper track, let's lock that as well. I have never done this before, but this should work. This is how I always think about how can I make it happen? Well, I need a shadow is basically you, but like a shadowed image, right? There's you, and then the shadow usually falls on the ground, and it doesn't look like you. It's like a silhouette of you. So step one is I said, well, I guess I need to make a silhouette. I made a silhouette. So I now have a silhouette track up there. What I'm going to do is, again, if I turn off the upper track, you can see there's an exact silhouette. Now I'm going to see if I can stretch and skew it a bit. I'm going to see if I can kind of, let me see if it lets me do it. I don't know if it let me freeform stretch and skew it, but I could go like this and it would be like that. And let me see. So there's kind of like a shadow on the ground. And one of the problems I'm going to have right off the bat, it's too dark. It's too dark, right? So I need to go, let's go to the image. I'll click on it and I'll go up to compositing. Let's dial back the opacity. See, this means how transparent it is, right? And I dial back the opacity, and it's like, okay, there you go. There's a shadow. There's a shadow on the ground of little baby Yoda, and you could get it all lined up. Whoops, not moving the background. That's why you should lock tracks. That you can get everything lined up the way you want, and go. Let's make sure you got it sitting the way you want it to. And I don't know how much you can stretch and skew these things. Probably, let me see if I go, doesn't let me stretch and skew it too much, but you could play around with that. So like if Yoda here, let me see, let's try to do an animated section. How deep can Daniel go with this? Yoda's here. Okay. Let's say that Yoda starts, he walks into scene. I'm going to put a keyframe right there. And also on I'm going to put a keyframe on this, shadow track. Whoop, what did I just do? I don't want it to shrink. I just want it keyframe. Why did it shrink it? Oh, Filmora having a glitch. Imagine that. Filmora not working. That never happens. Put a keyframe on it, changes the shape of the shadow. All right, so that's your shadow. So they're both keyframed right now to be there. So now I'd say I wanted them both to walk in. So then I would say, let me go back to the beginning. Let's say they come scooting in, and I'm going to let's move little baby Yoda first, staying on his horizontal line. And then secondly, I'm going to take the shadow one, and let's move that over too. Hopefully I got that in the right spot. I might have to readjust it. And then it should, if I did it right, if I hit play, it'll look like he's coming in with a shadow. There he comes with his shadow coming in right in underneath him. I might have moved that shadow a little bit. A lot of times I'll use the keyframe. See how it's getting a little closer to him? So technically, right in about here, that should have been a little higher. I think I ducked it a little bit. And then it can go faster. I'll move the speed of that. So now there's a shadow following little baby Yoda into frame. And then you have to ask yourself questions. Okay, now, well, he got there too soon. I got my keyframes out of motion here. You have to make sure your keyframes are lined up. I can't have a shadow show up before he does. There, and they come in together. Now you ask yourself, well, if I was going to have a move, let's say Yoda jumped up in the air, right? So from that spot, he then jumps up like over here. And let's say he lands over here, something like that. That might be too slow a jump. Yeah, these are really slow motions. Let me speed them up a little bit. He jumps up, then he goes over there. So one of the things you got to think about, if the light source is above, the shadow wouldn't go up with him. It would just go over. So you'd want it to go over. But also when someone jumps closer to the light, I believe depending on the type of light source, the shadow would get bigger. Yeah, it would get bigger. So you'd have to go, well, let's make the shadow get a little bit bigger, because that's what was happening when when you put your hand closer to a light, it makes a bigger shadow on the wall. So let's go, okay, let's make it bigger when he hits the apex. And then when he comes back down, we want it to shrink back down, and we want it to be back under him. So go, okay, it has to go back to smaller. And then it should be, back under him like there. So then you have an idea of just creating a shadow like, whoop, hey, there he is, he's jumping up, and there's a shadow coming back down. So just some simple techniques like that. I've never done that before. I don't know what that is, but think about how you can do that. Don't be afraid to blur out the shadow a little bit, because it's very stark. So these are just editing techniques you want to think about. I always try to say to myself, what in real life am I trying to recreate? I'm trying to recreate the idea of a shadow, which I know what a shadow looks like. So how do I do that? Okay, let me figure out how to do it. I've never done it before, but I'll try it. And I would just keep building on that, and I would try to make it what happens in real life. I would stand there with my hand in front of a light bulb and go, okay, does the shadow get bigger, when I move towards the light or away, and then I just learn those techniques, and then I just recreate them in the video editing software. Yes, exactly. Doug, welcome to the Jumping Grogu tutorial, courtesy of Daniel Batal. Did I go too deep on that? I kind of got excited about it. I'm like, hey, how do you do that? Now you can make the shadow smaller when he jumps. You could. The thing is, I think I'd have to think about that, right? If you get closer to the light, depends. If it was the sun, because the sun's so far away, the shadow would, if it was sunlight, the shadow would get smaller, right? Because the sun is way far away. But if you're in a room, if you're trying to create the effect of in a room, then if someone jumped up, the shadow would get bigger. It's like, think about if you're doing, the shadow puppets on the wall, if I'm farther away, I believe it gets smaller. Yes. And if I get closer to the light, because I'm blocking so much of the light, the shadow gets bigger. If I'm wrong about that, please correct me. But I think, so you have to really think about, Megan said that's correct. So you really have to think about what you're trying to recreate. Is it a light in a room or is it the sun? If it's the sun, then yeah, if you jumped up in the air, your shadow would get smaller the same way a plane way up in the air doesn't leave a huge shadow on the ground, but a plane that's flying pretty low, you can physically see the shadow as it goes overhead. So just think about that, try to recreate it, take all those things into context. Instead of asking, how do I get the software to do it? Ask yourself, well, what am I trying to create? And then break it down into little bitty pieces, like Ed said, and just think about what you want to add in there to make it look effective. Awesome, thanks. I use DaVinci Studio, but most of this stuff, Darth TV, you can transfer the principles, all the same, right? It's image tracks, it's video tracks, it's just playing with them a bit, messing around with them. DaVinci is going to give you more ability to like stretch and skew. It would be cool to have a shadow that kind of gets stretched off to the side a bit, which you can kind of do in Filmora, just not really well. It's a little, the thing about Filmora is it's kind of limited on some of the overall things. Like if I wanted to really take that shadow right here and I said, well, I really want it to be like stretched off to the side, I could do this and then I could but it doesn't let me really, it always kind of works in a very square value of stretching, right? It doesn't let me really, let me skew it the way I would like to skew it. And that's what throws me off sometimes, is like, I want it to do more. And it's always like, well, it's not really skewing it, it's just turning it. So things like that. Just think about all those things that you can apply to, think about what happens in real life and then try to recreate those in your video editing software, no matter which one you're using. Let's see, what's the discussion now? Smaller shadows only because the light comes from multiple directions and cancels each other out. Sometimes, Danielle, I think I made an excellent case for, it depends on how close the light source is. Light source in a room, light source in a building, you'd probably, or in a small room, you'd get a larger shadow, and farther away light source, you're going to get a smaller shadow. Let's have a whole discussion on shadows. And if you jump to the sun, your shadow will get also fainter. Yeah, there's a perfect example. Like, talk about thinking things through, right? If, like, let's say it was just that, it would get fainter. It was a great observation. So I won't change this all right now, but let's say, okay, let's do it. Let's say this was the sun. Then I want, first of all, let's make sure the keyframes line up. Let's do this one, but say, oh, it should have gotten smaller. That should have been smaller because we're doing a sun. So the idea of it jumps up, it gets closer to the sun, right? We're using the sun. It would also get fainter. The only thing that I don't like about Filmora is you cannot keyframe transparency. So if I go into here and then I say, okay, at this point, I want it to be even more transparent. See how it doesn't change? Right now, Filmora limits that. On a better video editing software, you'd be able to keyframe the transparency too. In Filmora, you have to do transparency first and then keyframe, or it won't change at all. But that's a great observation. I think all those things are important. When you think about that, have that conversation in your head, and that will allow you to build anything you want in your video editing software. If you know, well, what would that look like? I think half the things I've ever done doing video edits is like, I asked myself, well, what would that look like? If I was going to fly, what would flying look like? And I figured out how to make myself fly. Like the idea of like when something just flying off the ground really quickly and figuring out the blurs and how your body kind of gets stretched out and morphed if you go really quick because your eye sees it as a blur and as a stretch. So there was things like that made it super realistic. I did a really good, pat myself in the back, I did a really good version of that with Movavi, just teaching, like showing myself how to like take off like Superman with some real basic stuff. I filmed it all with my phone. It looked better than half the stuff I see when people do these really elaborate, Adobe Premiere Pro things. The question is, Daniel, what are the software to use to remove backgrounds, not Photoshop? I use Affinity Photo, period. Affinity Photo is the one that I use. I just think it's a better price point. Usually this time of year, let me check. First of all, Photoshop is a license thing. You have to constantly pay for the license. Whereas, let me go back over here. Let me pull this up really quickly. Affinity Photo is a one-time purchase, and it's as good as Photoshop. And usually it's about $60 for a lifetime license. And this time of year, I think they tend to, you get a free trial of it, but I got to see. Yeah, it's $55 for the lifetime license for Affinity Photo. And they, if you wait, they'll get near Black Friday and they'll cut that in half. It'll be like $25 for $26 for like a lifetime license. And it's killer. It's every bit as good as Photoshop. So that's the one I'd get. You can use things like GIMP. Those are harder to learn. I'd say find one really good video editing, photo editing software and stick with it. I like Affinity. Great for making thumbnails. Great for all that kind of stuff. Daniel, the shadow doesn't get smaller and smaller the further away the light source is. It gets smaller until the same size object becomes parallel beams. That's incorrect, Sid. Go take a lamp in your bedroom, walk up to it, and make a shadow puppet. And I want you to go very close to the light and then go very far away from the light and watch what happens to your little shadow puppet on the wall. And we'll talk in group. But thank you for playing along with our shadow game. Yeah, it's a great deal. I love it. I'm a huge fan of it. I'm a huge fan of Affinity Photo. It's just the right software for the price. Let me see this. This question was, Daniel, how do I move Filmora incrementally when I need to cut the edit between two frames? I think you meant TWO frames. If I need to remove a cough, how do I move Filmora incrementally when I need to cut the edit between frames? Cut the edit between frames. Let me make sure. It's like if there's a cough or something. So if there's just a piece of footage that you may have coughed or done something like that, let me just open it up really quickly and we'll see if we can address that. So let me start again here. I'll do a new project, 16 by 9. No, I don't want to save Grogu. Sorry. sorry, Grogu. I didn't save it. You won't be seeing Grogu on my channel, jumping Grogu tutorial on my channel anytime. You might though. Maybe that's a new video I should do. The jumping Grogu tutorial. Doug, help me. English is hard. Let me see. Let me find something I've worked on recently. Let me just grab a piece of video somewhere here. Do I have some video? Is this video? Is this me? I don't know. I don't know if this is me.
Whether it's short,
that's
long, medium, live, or otherwise.
I don't want a vertical one. Let me see if I have a 16 by 9. Let's see. It was a studio tour I did. Let me see. Okay, let me just grab a chunk of video somewhere here. Okay, so here's a piece of video, and you want to cut out like a cough, you were saying, right? Like if there's some portion where you might cough or something. This is how I do it. Let me get this out of the way. Let me get me out of the way. If there's a cough or something, first of all, you'll usually see it in the audio, though my audio I do separately, so you have to excuse me here. What I do is if I want to cut out a cough, like say the cough happens right here, I usually stretch out the timeline as much as I can, because if you stretch it, that's going to give you frame by frame. And the way I do frame by frame is I use the arrow keys on my keyboard. And if you see, every time I hit the arrow right, it goes frame by frame one to the right. And if I go to the left, it goes frame by frame to the left. And if I hold it, it'll give me a scrub through like this. I'm holding the arrow keys now. So I'll find that cough and I'll find the frame that it happens on. And once I find it, you can use the scissors, or you can use, if you have a keyboard shortcut, and I go, okay, when did the cough happen? And that's where the cough ended. And then I cut that. And then all I do is I'm going to delete the cough right there. Now that I've separated, I'm going to delete it. But here's a question I get a lot. Sometimes if you just delete it, which is just right click and you can put delete, you got a space there now. Like, whoops, what just happened? Make sure you have, see right over here on the left, this like weird little green chain link with the line through it. Make sure that's white. Make sure it's activated. That's ripple delete or ripple edit, which will squash everything back together if you remove a section. So if you hit delete, now it puts the two pieces together. So that's all you're doing is just cutting that out. I also do audio dips sometimes if there's just a cough or something. depending on what the situation was, I might actually just take the audio and dip it down. I do that a lot too. People have asked me about that. Like, well, how did you do that? You know, I think a lot of times if it's just like a breath or something to that effect. Here, let me show you. Let me go like, let me see if I can take a longer section here, and I will detach the audio. See how it's right here? There might be like an area in here in between words, like maybe I was here, and maybe I sniffed or something in between. I'll put let me go bigger so you can actually see what I'm doing here. Full screen. I'll go, there was some noise here. I'll actually put the playhead at the last bit of thing I was talking about. I'll add a keyframe from the audio tab right there. That dot puts a dot right there that holds that volume there. I'll put another dot where I start talking again, add a keyframe. That's right under the fader up here. That'll add the keyframe. And then I'll go to the middle in between them where I made some noise, and I'll grab the fader, and all I'll do is pull down that volume. It'll add a keyframe, and it'll duck the volume. So that'll duck a section where I might have been sniffing or exhaling or coughed a little bit or whatever it might be. So sometimes I don't want to remove the audio. I just want the noise gone. That's an easy way to snuff out that an audio glitch, like a cough or what it could be anything. Sometimes with me, it's a breath. Like I'll be talking, and then I'll be like, you'll hear me go for oxygen, and it's like, oh, okay, I saw what you were trying to do there, Daniel, but it sounded like you were huffing and puffing. Yeah, definitely. Ed, you tell them. Hit that like button. I appreciate it. Hey, Daniel, how do I move? Oh, that was it. The same, the incremental cut. So I hope that helped. Yeah, incrementally. Oh, one other thing I want to mention there for that question. Sometimes what happens when you have that incremental thing you're asking about, you go, yeah, well, I'm trying to get it, Daniel, but one frame, if I start on one frame, it's too close to the thing. And then if I go to the next frame, I'm too far. It's like, I wish it was like right in between. Like I need like an extra frame in there. It's almost like that's too close. And then if I'm on this frame and then I go to, you know, the next frame, it's not enough. It feels like no matter how much you scroll in here, right? Like I'm scrolling in, no matter how close I scroll in, as far as I go, it's just not enough. Like it jumps too much from frame to frame. Then one of the things you can do is check the project settings. If your project is set for right now, mine is set for, it's just basically 60 frames. If yours is set for, say, 24 frames, what'll happen is the distance between frames is a lot larger. And if you're like, nope, that's too close, that's too far away, then just change it to a higher frame. It doesn't improve or change the quality, but you can change it to, 60 frames per second. And that'll give you more extra frames per second, right? Because 24 frames per second, that means for every second of time, you've only got 24 splits. If you change the project to 60 frames per second, regardless of some of the footage, especially when it's an audio thing, it'll give you more spaces to splice. It won't give you more frames. It won't suddenly make your project into a 60 frames. It'll change your project. It won't turn your video footage into 60 frames per second. And sometimes it can be problematic because what happens there is the project is going to have to fill in the gap for some of those frames, because if it's only filmed at 24 frames per second and you change it to 60, what sometimes can happen is you get extra frames because it's the software is trying to stretch the footage just to make sure it's filling in the gaps. So it fills in the gaps by going, for these next two frames, it's only the identical image. And sometimes if you cut it, it can get things a little out of sync. So just be careful on that. But that's a great way to get in there for basic things where you have to find that extra bit of cutting ability. I've got both Filmora and DaVinci, but my preference is for Filmora. Much easier to use. A lot of people say that. I like Filmora because it gets a lot of the stuff we do on YouTube really easily, simple to use. And DaVinci Resolve is great, but it's got a higher learning curve. Runs better on a Mac than Filmora does. Filmora runs pretty good on a PC. So does DaVinci, but DaVinci has some pretty high specs it needs too. Just like the both thing, the more you use them, the more intricate that becomes. Like the more resource, the heavier your project, the more resources it uses from your computer. Leslie, how you doing? Says, does anyone know if it's possible to use one Filmora license on two PCs in the same household? Yes, you can. That's what I do all the time. I actually have it on multiple PCs. And where is it? So I have it on my laptop. I have it on this PC. I have two PCs behind me. It's on both of those. The only restriction is that you can't use them at the same time. Like you can't be editing on one computer and have someone else that you know, like a husband or someone working for you, editing also on Filmora from the same license. It'll make you log out of one or the other. And I should rephrase that. Technically speaking, you can edit, you can't export. It's once you go to export, it'll hold you out. It'll say like, oh, well, you can only be logged into one computer at a time. So some of the features that you may have paid for may not be available in the other one. So that's going to be the problem. It's kind of really use case specific. They have a business license that allows you to have it on multiple computers and have multiple people using it at the same time. But realistically speaking, if it's just you and you're like, yeah, well, I want it on my PC, but then when I travel, I want it on my laptop. No problem. The single individual license, you can do that. It'll just prompt you that you have to make sure you're logged in to that computer and logged out. It'll say it right there when you open it up, like on your laptop. I'll jump on a plane and start editing. It'll be like, you are currently logged into a different computer. Would you like to log out of that one and log into this one? Yes, I would. So that's how that works. Let's see. Great question. What's a common go-to text font? There's a lot of common ones. Great question, though. I mean, you never get a simple question like that makes a ton of sense to ask. Some of the simple ones are things like a simple go-to font. Let me grab a font here so you can see, and we can take a look at how some of them actually look. Let me grab a default title. Let's pop it here. So there's a standard one right there. This font is that's Roboto Medium. Roboto is the font that YouTube uses for most of its, text for how it writes the titles on your videos and the descriptions. So, Roboto. What am I doing? I'm changing the world. I'm changing the wrong thing. I don't know which. I have all the different versions here. Roboto Medium. You can see it's a very standard text. That's kind of what you're going to see for text on YouTube. The Arial is a very common one too. I like anything Arail is a very common one. That one is Arial. Arial. That's just a very Aroil. I can't spell. That's a very common one. The one that we were talking about earlier that Mr. Beast uses is that. Is it I can't remember. I had to license it. It was like Comica Axis. That's that very Mr. Beast one. You can get any of them on anything. There's another one is a standard one. I think it's called Free Sans. Yeah, Free Sans is I like that one a lot too. Free Sans. I mean, Sans is sans serif. It doesn't have extra little squirrelies and stuff on the T's and the R's. It's very straightforward. Free Sans is one of my favorite. For just basic kind of easy to read text. If you want bold, my favorite for bold is Impact. Let me change the Impact so you can see it. Impact is, I use this for like thumbnails a lot. Impact is a great one. It's just a real thick, like a real thick looking one. That's a great one I use a lot. It's just real easy to read, Impact. The thing I don't like about Impact, believe it or not, is, this is funny. Look, this is how weird I am. I don't like their question marks. Like, look, that's a great looking font. And then you go question mark. Oops, sorry. Question mark. It's the weirdest looking question mark, and it drives me crazy. I'm like, I hate that question mark. A lot of times I'll actually change just for the question mark, and I'll go, all right, I want everything else in Impact, but I'm going to change that to, I'll pick a different question mark in a different font. That's another thing you can do on these guys, by the way. You can highlight one particular letter or character in something you're typing and just change the font for that particular character. I don't think I ever really talk about that, but I do it a lot when I don't like something. I'll try to find it. Not that I like any of these really anyway, but that might be a better question mark. And you can also, if you highlight one, that's another thing you can do too. If you highlight just one thing, you can also change the font size for that. So you can make it bigger or smaller just for that one character. A little bigger. Probably go even bigger than that. Like we'll go 190. 190. Oh, I can't do it. 190. Look, oh yeah, there we go. So real simple tricks like that in Filmora. Like I like a different question mark that is more readable, different font. Don't ask me why. It's just one of those weird things. Still scrolling through here trying to catch the questions. Right? Isn't that an awful question mark? I totally agree. Oh, completely off the beaten path here. Boogie Woogie Blues and Classical Piano. I subscribed to this channel the other day because I believe it's a she. There's no voice in there. There's just a hands on piano. Left a comment on my channel. I've been way into trying to learn how to play some boogie woogie piano. As you can see, the thing sitting behind me collecting dust. And I saw that channel name and I went, I'm going to go check it out. It was awesome and I subscribed. So the importance of having a great channel name that connects with the target audience, right there, my friend. Let me see what you got going on here. I have a question to Mike. I put headphones on and on it to hear my own voice. Mic connected to Android. If I want to play a video that okay, let me try and make sure I can understand your question. King of Assyria. I have questions about microphone. If I put my headphones on to hear my own voice, mic connected to Android. If I want to play a video that I want to react to. So you want to play a video and you want to be able to react to it. Okay. So this is how you would do that. You want to do it after the fact, right? I have an entire video on my channel showing how to do one way to do it, which is, let me just get this up here. Let me pull up. If you were doing a video, what you can do is if you're on, you know how to record yourself. I'm taking it. If you go to media, up in the upper, this is your import. That's where you import everything. Right next to it, you have the record. You can record your PC screen. If you put record your PC screen, which is now going to be over here, you can click on settings and then you can say that you would also like to, let me pull this up a little bit. You can record your camera stream. Now, I don't know if I have if it'll let me do two at once here. I could try. Will it let me? No, it won't let me. But it's basically, it's going to give me another window. It's on Elgato, I believe, right? Oh, it's not going to let me pull it over there. It's on my other screen. But this will allow you to add your camera to the stream. And now it'll record everything that's going on, and it'll let you add in your, it's down in the corner. I put it there. It'll allow you to add your webcam. So my webcam currently is staring at something else, but it'll allow you to place this and you can stretch it out and go, oh, I want to react. And you can actually do it all at once. So this would record your webcam, just tell it the camera, and it'll start recording, and you can literally just sit here and do your thing. But the only thing is afterwards you can't change that. Wherever you place it, it puts it all into one video track. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is just record your webcam or your camera or your phone, right? Do it like that. Record your webcam, right? This is, you pick your video device. Mine is being used currently to live stream, so probably it's not going to give me anything, right? And then once I do that, I'm just going to start recording, and depending on where my playhead is, if I said record, what it'll do is it'll start recording now, and I can start playing this, and I can start talking and letting this thing do its thing, and it will sit there, and then when I'm done, I think it's F9 gets it to stop. I can't remember. But anyway, yeah, I can't remember which one stops it again. Yeah. But then after you've done that, basically, so you can open up record your webcam while you're playing the video in Filmora, and then you'll have a different track of it, and you just have to line them up. What I would tell you is add a sync point. I always say, like, no matter what you're doing, add a sync point like a clap, so that you know that you can sync the clap tracks up. If you're watching something else, go, oh, I'm going to start right here. You know, let that clap track be heard, and so you can sync those points. But you can either do it after the fact by just recording your webcam, or you could do it by doing it all at once. One of the cool things about Filmora is it does let you do those quick response type videos. Quick question about input-output project settings. For example, I have 4K video, but it goes to TikTok on 1080. Should I make the project Filmora 1080 or 4K and just export it to 1080? Does TikTok only support, that's a good question, because does TikTok only support 1080 video? Does anyone know? Anyone? Yell it out in the chat. I'll look that up real quick. TikTok, is that 4K video? Do they allow you to do? I think how to upload. I'm seeing some stuff, high quality 4K videos. It says it allow you to do it, but you only want it on 4K. It sounds like, I'm not a big TikToker, I apologize. It sounds like you can do it, put 4K. What I will tell you is anytime you work in 4K, it just takes up a lot of computer resources, right? It's going to make your computer work harder. So if you have a 4K video, but you just want it to be in 1080, what I would tell you is set the project for 1080 and then export in 1080. Because it will it'll put less strain on your system, and it'll still look pretty good. Especially for TikTok, that everybody's watching from a mobile. It's not like a lot of people are watching TikTok on desktop, where we with YouTube, we're really pushing a little bit towards higher quality because people will watch it on a big screen TV. They'll watch it on their desktop. So better quality means a little bit more. TikTok is mostly mobile, so the 1080 is fine. If you film in 4K, just downgrade it. Keep the project at 1080, and then put the export setting at 1080. Just keep the bit rate higher. Don't put low bit rate. Low bit rate is what will make it look fuzzy and pixelated. Keep the bit rate higher. Let me see. Hi, Daniel. Awesome as usual. Silly question perhaps, but are there tips and tricks you'd add to a 10-hour deep sleep video? I'm creating a decent format, but your opinion is incredibly valuable. Well, I'll be honest, and you're going to hate this answer. YouTube is now clamping down on your style of channel. Meaning if you're making these, it's a video you run for 10 hours while you sleep. It's not that they're not letting them on YouTube. You can make these videos all you want, but they're really clamping down. It's very hard to get those channels nowadays monetized. The reason being is, think about the process. Advertisers don't want, like, wait, you're going to put my ad on in a video where people are sound asleep? What? First of all, people who make those videos probably don't want ads running in the middle of them because it would wake the person up if you're trying to keep them asleep. And two, they just they think it's a bad place to advertise. They'll do some pre-roll stuff. So YouTube has gotten enough complaints from advertisers, and it makes sense. Why would anyone want to advertise when you're doing these 10-hour videos that people are supposed to be sleeping through? So be super careful about that. I know you want to know. I'm creating a decent form of opinion. I would really be careful here. It's just one of those things that those long form, I'm going to make a 10-hour video that's just like music playing and stuff. I'm telling people to move away from it because they're going to find it's harder and harder to get those channels monetized if that's the goal. If you're just making them for a different purpose, maybe you have a website and people are, downloading these things, or it's just being hosted here and you're embedding them elsewhere, then no, I don't. This is a tough one. This is a tough niche. It's one of those things. I'm really warning people to stay away from it. I think they're starting to fall into the area, even when they're made really well. I had the same issue with a couple of channels that do the Reiki healing, where they'll just have their hands up and the whole video will be like in 45 minutes of their hands up. It's like, that stuff's just getting kicked off the platform for the YPP, not off YouTube, but YPP. So what I would tell you, my biggest advice for you is, if you are monetized, count your blessings and be prepared, because I think another hammer is going to fall for a lot of those channels, and I feel bad. It's not that I don't think there's value in it. I just think that it doesn't fit with the YPP. So for editing, for the time being, whatever works, whatever gets people enjoying the content. I have a question. What does the snappy thing on Wondershield Filmora do? Like snappy timeline or something? And what I like about that is the specificity of this question. Let me see. The snap. If you're talking about I'm going to make sure I know which one you're talking about when you say snap. I think you're talking about the ripple edit, right? There's also the ability to, do they have it in here? Timeline snapping. The timeline snapping is just the ability to have it drop into the timeline effectively, so that, let me see if I can give you an example of this. Yes, it'll try to snap it to the most recent. I think that's the one we have there. Enable time. Yeah, it enables the snapping to the within the ripple edit is what I think you're asking. The enable timeline snap. That one's off. If I turn it on, let me see. Let me make sure I got it right. Enable timeline snapping. Let me turn that off again. And let me pull that down. It should go. It used to snap it right to the previous one. Let me make sure that it's still doing it. Good question. It used to snap it right to here, so that in the timeline wherever you put it, it was supposed to snap it right to the, when you bring it in, it wouldn't leave any gaps. Guess what? Very high probability that with, it should, there we go. There's the line. It shows you the exact snap point, right? So it snaps it right to where you want it. You go, that's what I want right there. And you can line it right back up so that it puts it right in place. Someone asked me a question. I'm going to answer a random question that someone asked me about the other day on a video. One of the things about inserting, someone said to me it doesn't work. There's a whole process that you guys need to learn. Let me get my face out of here so you can see what I'm pointing at. The way that things like the ripple delete, track locking. Okay, so ripple delete is this one over here, right? Can you see that right over there? That little chain link. Locking your tracks, you select the track, see the lock, and in the way that you stack your timeline. I think people get confused, and there's a process you have to learn that one of these days maybe I'll spend more time with it. But there's things you can do like, listen, if you don't have anything locked and you have the ripple edit on, meaning it's looking at your whole project and trying to optimize for it. Someone told me, oh, I can't insert an audio track, which I thought was hysterical the other day. I'm like, of course you can. It won't automatically, it won't edit for that. It won't make the adjustment. Here, let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm talking in circles right now. Let me take a lo-fi groove. Okay, so there's a lo-fi groove. Let me scrunch this down. I've got the playhead here. I'm on an audio track, right? I'll select that track. See how that makes it dark? I can right-click on this lo-fi groove and put insert. See what it does? It inserted it right where that playhead was and moved everything after it forward. Someone told me, they got in a big discussion with me on YouTube saying it doesn't work. And I said, it does work. You just have to make sure that you don't have other things locked. You have to understand that it'll only move when it has the ability to move things forward. I had a splice there where everything was spliced. Now, if I said I had the playhead here, there's not a specific splice, and then I tried to insert things and I put that here, it would cut, it's trying to figure out what to do next. It moved that forward, but it didn't splice my footage because I was telling it to go add that bit of audio in right here. So the only thing it would split is the audio track, and then it moved everything forward that it knew about. So it didn't split the video track because it's like, well, half of it is before the point and half of it is after the point. Why would we do that? So there's these things that you have to understand, like, oh, if you want something to happen there, you're gonna need to slice your footage and your audio. Slice your footage and your audio, and then hit insert, and it'll move everything from that point forward. Another thing you want to think about is if your ripple delete is off when you're adding certain things in, like that one right there. If I delete that audio, I'm going to be left with a space, right? See how that space is now left in there? If I had the ripple delete on, the ripple edit, and there's nothing stopping it from squashing it together, I could click delete, and then it pulls it all back together. Now, there's going to be points where it can't always do that because of things blocking the way. Let me give you an example. See, I've got a space here, right? Let me click on this. See that lo-fi groove? If I delete that, it pulls everything together because it can, because it had all this stuff after it right here. And it said, well, once that's gone, everything moves over. But if it couldn't do that, if it didn't have the ability to move it over, and I clicked on that and then hit delete, it just leaves a space. The reason it does that, it can't pull anything all over any farther because this track is already bumping into this track. It's saying that's as far as we can pull everything. We can't pull it any farther. So by deleting that last track there, it's telling you I can't pull that out. I can't move this any more left because this right here is stopping from all these other things here from going any farther left. Now, when I have the ripple edit on, I could grab the end of the track and pull it back, and it'll pull everything back with it. See, I can do this kind of and when I have the ripple edit on, it'll also move it forward. I can push forward, and it takes all those things, and everything after that point, it moves around because the ripple edit is on. If I had the ripple edit off, it would not do that. See, it would allow me to change and leave a space. So think about that. Learn all these different things. Another thing, too, now, ripple edit is on. Let's do this. Pull it back. Moves everything back. Now, if I locked the audio track, saying, listen, I'm locking it. Don't change anything. But I've got the ripple edit on it, and I'm saying, hey, push everything out. It moves all of this stuff out, but now the audio is out of sync because that track is locked. I said, whatever I'm doing now, lock this audio track so it isn't affected by what I'm doing up top. And I'll do that sometimes, like if my audio's out of sync, I'm like, oh crap, my audio fell out of sync. I need to readjust it to get it back in sync. And it might be a frame or two that I move it or something. Who knows what happens. But there's different reasons for doing that. But one of the things anyone who's using Filmora, make sure you understand track lock, make sure you understand ripple delete, make sure you understand insert, make sure you understand grouping. That's another thing. Do you guys use grouping in your Filmora projects? That can be really helpful too. Let me get my ugly mug out of the shot. But if you have things that are, let me unlock this. Let me detach audio here. And let me get rid of, this is another thing, multiple select. You guys know how to do multiple select? All you do is just left click in your timeline above a track and create a square. It highlights everything. Then you can just hit like delete and take everything away all at once. If you're doing stuff like this, you can group these. You can go, I'm going to take this and I'm going to take this. And even though this is, right now it's 2 different tracks, right? It's audio and it's video. I could move the video track and now it's out of sync. If I don't want that to happen, what I can do is I can group those. Right click and then hit group. And what it does is it keeps them, it makes sure that no matter, see, I don't have them highlighted, but they're grouped now. So if I start cutting these or I start like changing the length, they're all grouped together now. So it's treating these 2 as a pair. And you can do that with multiple different things. Sometimes you'll have tracks that have text and things on top. All you want to do is highlight all the pieces. You might have a text track in here on top of it. It doesn't even have to be a full text track. It can just be some text. It doesn't even have to be the whole thing. And maybe, who knows, whatever other things you have. Another piece of text over here. And you go, well, I want all of these are timed perfectly. I want those, oh man, the fine tuning. All of these are timed perfectly. I'm going to highlight all of them, right click and hit group. Now they're all grouped together. See how they all turn green? That's just telling me, oh, these are all part of one group. You can actually, I think it changes the color for different groups as you do several. But now they're all different so that if I'm moving this, I don't accidentally go, I got to grab each one and move it. This is one section where I already have the music figured out. I have the audio in sync. I've got the titles here. You can group them all together. So that can affect when you're doing like a ripple delete. If they're already all grouped together, then all of those will move as a team too. So learning all these independent things when you're using Filmora is much more important about how do I make myself fly? The crazy things I get asked. Really learn about how to do the grouping features, the editing features, the cutting features, transitions. All of those things can be super important. I do have to take a quick second here to shout out the sponsors who allow me to do this every week.
This live stream is sponsored in part by StreamYard, live streaming made simple, and by Spreadshop, the #1 resource for all of your print-on-demand needs.
So if you're interested in making live streams that look anything like this and be able to share things on screen, I've got links down below to StreamYard where you can download the software. Sign up today because it's web-based, and you can start using it today. I also have links to Spreadshop where you can actually start making your own merch that you can have right in your live stream and push them up on screen. Remind people of who you work with. Let me see. Let me get back into the questions here. See if I can get through this. Question was, what's your advice for the timing of the scene changes in a video to keep the viewers engaged? I try to switch scenes every 3 to 5 seconds. Is this a good editing pace? Shane, it's really funny. I think that it really depends on, it's a great question. I love this question, Shane. If on my channel, I did some breakdowns of like how Mr. Beast does it and how like guys at like Hot Ones do it and how Linus Tech Tips does it. And those guys are really fast at the beginning because it makes sense for their kind of content. They edit as quickly as a change every second, which is crazy fast. But then they slow the pace down as the video gets going. So what I think is, Shane, test it out. Your audience, your niche could be different than, like, obviously Mr. Beast's niche is very broad-based and it's very fast-paced, high energy, right? And not everything is that. You might be teaching people how to do something, and really fast changes could throw them off. So what I say is I try to make content that, one, is really focused on the needs of the viewer, and then I try to edit it down to keep it visually interesting so that it's not really boring, like, oh, I'm staring at the screen forever. That's one of the reasons a lot of times live streams don't do as well as edited content, because you get to stare at one person's face the whole time, and it can be a little overwhelming unless they're super interesting. But I think that find the pace. Look at your audience retention graphs. And if you see that you're losing people at certain places, I go like, let me see if I can figure out what I did there and if I can trim the fat out, or I can change the pacing up. So maybe I'm using a little more B-roll, or I'm using a more interesting approach to it. So visually changing it up. A great question, because YouTube is definitely a visual medium. So I wouldn't go in and say, oh, I have to edit every 3 to 5 seconds. That can be overwhelming. But depending on what it is you're making, what I would do is I would test different pacing out, and don't feel like one pacing has to exist the entire video. You might want to start with something a little faster and, really, like higher energy, and then kind of dial it back to a 7 or 8 once you get into the flow. Like maybe sometimes the beginning of that video, it can be really important to win the viewer. I've always said, YouTube videos are a lot like Netflix. Like, when you're trying to find a new movie to watch and you're like, I think I've seen everything, and you're going through all these movies that maybe are not as popular. You got the remote in your hand and you're watching the beginning of the movie and you're like, is this any good? And you watch like the first 5 minutes and you go, okay. And once you put the remote down, then you're in. Like, you're probably going to watch the movie. But if it kind of sucks in the first 5 minutes, you'll change the channel. You'll go to a different movie. I think sometimes YouTube's like that. You really want to, at the beginning, capture those people. They've actually found that if you can really hold people engaged for the first 30 seconds, much higher probability that they'll hang around for the rest of the video. So great question. Try to find a pacing that works for your kind of content, because your conversation, you could be having a conversation that's, how to deal with the loss of a loved one or dealing with an addiction. And that's something you don't want 100 miles an hour, maybe, right? It's not supposed to be Mr. Beast-esque. So just find a pacing that works for your audience and let the audience retention graph tell you. If you're hanging on and they're staying in there and you've got great retention, that's a good pace. Oh, there's John. How you doing, pal? I have learned age and niche matter with editing, 100%. I have some people get irritated by jump cuts or B-roll if I'm doing a talking head video. Yeah, John made a really great, John is a ultra marathon runner, and he made a really great video recently that it was a short film, and it was all talking about this 24-hour crazy race that he was doing. Like, holy cow, what the heck is going on, dude? Was it like 100-mile? I can't remember. You think I should know this, John, right? I watched the thing twice. It was 100-mile, 24. It was crazy race that he did. And it was edited so well, but it was like he used, he filmed everything himself, and really had his voiceover was on point. One thing John was really great at is music. He's really paying attention to the music he uses to create the mood, so that it's not so much about how fast paced it is. How about to create a mood, an atmosphere, get the people to start feeling emotion about what you're talking about. And John's been crushing it with that. Let me see. I'm trying to get through some of these. Question. Do you see a big difference between HD and 4K videos? Many of our viewers watching the big screen. Do I see a big difference between them? What I see the big difference between is not in terms of, the viewer. I think this is the funny thing. If I've had plenty of great movies that were filmed in 1080 that were put on a full screen that look really they're indistinguishable from 4K. You'd have to have the perfect eye because they're filmed much better. I think what the problem is most people we're crappier filmers. This is the way we are. We're YouTubers. We're not filmmakers, so we don't know how to film as great 1080. HD videos as someone who's really, really good with a camera. So the better you get at a camera, the better your 1080 starts to look, because you learn how to light it, you learn how to do all that stuff. It looks really, really great. So I would spend more time learning how to capture great footage more than anything else. Make sure what you capture, Esther, is really, really powerful. The one thing I do say is, even if you're filming in 1080, export in 4K, because YouTube, uses a different codec. Then it gives you more headroom. So it physically gives you more expansion on the platform. Because if you go to one of my, like I said this earlier, if you go to one of my videos on my channel, you'll see that a lot of it is, let's see. Let me see where let me find it here. I'll give you an example here. I film everything, sometimes 4K, sometimes 1080, but I export everything in 4K. Let me see. So let me see if you can spot the difference here. Let me pull the question down for a second. I spot it internally. So if I look at this and I go, and this is, again, the stream is going to have some restrictions, but I go, okay, that looks a little fuzzy to me. But if I go into the settings, see, it's only set for 720 right now, because that's the other thing. The YouTube default player mostly sets to 720. But I export in 4K. And what happens is, I don't know if you can see the difference, it immediately starts looking a little crisper. So the quality of what I filmed looks a little bit better. My 1080 is a little better looking than other people's 1080 because I've filmed it in 1080 and I've exported it in 4K. It just gives me more bandwidth, and it's just a different thing. Once you export in 4K, and again, by 4K I actually mean UHD, which is lower 4K, which is it's the 2160p. Full 4K is higher. There's different levels of 4K. It just opens up more bandwidth. So YouTube recognizes it, even though you filmed it in 1080, but you exported it in 4K, they'll give you a different codec and it looks a little better on the platform and people can raise the quality in the player. So Do I think it's important? I think it's something to pay attention to. I think as we move forward, is it the end all be all? No, I know plenty of great creators are still filming and editing in 1080 because they filmed the quality is so good you'd never even notice. It looks so good. Let's see. All right. Talking about capturing video, is it recommended to capture high quality rate? I you know, in 2K, I tend to do UHD, but it just depends. Like I said, frame rate and the shutter speed and the kind of quality of the lenses and everything, the lighting structure is going to really make the biggest difference. I think that I wouldn't get, it takes so much more computer resources to edit in 4K. So unless you're really set up for it, like I think like if you're using Final Cut Pro, or Final Cut, I don't think they call it Pro anymore. Oh, it's still Final Cut Pro. They just lost the X at the end, I think. Doug will explain it. That works really well on a Mac, and it doesn't really slow you down. But if it's making your edits take longer, editing, then I don't know if it is worth the time spent on it for most videos. I say as long as it looks really good and sounds really good, you probably get by. All right, I've been talking here for a while. I appreciate all the great questions here. I hope some of these things that we talked about today were helpful. All you guys have the great rest of your weekend. I'm going to go get on my motorcycle and ride a bit. So I hope you have something fun planned for the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon.